என்னேசுவே என் ஜீவன் நீரல்லோ, என்னேசுவே என் வேலன் நீரல்லோ, என்னேசுவே என் ஜீவன் நீரல்லோ, என்னேசுவே என் வேலன் நீரல்லோ. சிலுவையின் பாதையில் வெளிச்சம் நீரல்லோ, தேசரும் முகம் கண்டு இன்றும் களிப்பேன். சிலுவையின் பாதையில் வெளிச்சம் நீரல்லோ, தேசரும் முகம் கண்டு இன்றும் களிப்பேன். மரண இருளின்
Good evening to all of you, and I welcome all of you in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to this Speaking Books English Forum 38th session. Today the book we are going to see is, the title of the book is He Healeth Me, written by P.K.D. Lee, and our presenter is Mr. Aathma Soruban. I have a little information about the presenter. May I request Dr. Rajasekaran to say a few words of introduction about the presenter for today. And I welcome Pastor John Sunder. I think I have seen him sometime back in some other forum. So you are a minister, and I welcome you also. Hopefully, I think that Reverend Robinson Peter and Dr. David Karunakaran will be joining us, hopefully, and I welcome them also. I also extend my warm welcome and greetings to all those who will be watching through the live telecast, and as well as in the Facebook and in the YouTube. Once again, I request Dr. Rajasekaran to say a few words of introduction about Brother Aathma Soruban, and then I will speak few words and we will give the session to him.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone. I welcome Annan Aathma Soruban Annan. We call him Annan always. I know him, I think, from my marriage onwards. He's known to me from my marriage because he was working in EU, Evangelical Union, UESI, and that is how I come to know him. And I respect the servants of God and the people who are working in EU, and that is how I come to know. He is a good teacher and a good Bible reader and an interpreter, and the way he entered into the speaking books in Tamil, we still remember, is the presentation he brought in a new way of PowerPoint. And in another occasion, we were in a confusion and we were having a severe discussion. By the time Annan, he gave a very beautiful conclusion that made everybody keep quiet. And that is how I understood his knowledge about the Word of God and the interpretation and the mission mind, and above all, the sound theology that he is having. So he's a servant of God. He's working, I think he must have worked more than 40 years, if I'm not wrong. It must be more than 40 years because this is my 36th year in the ministry, full-time ministry. So he's close to my co-brother, Salvadurai. And that is how we come to know each other, and we respect each other, and we rarely we meet, but still our heart is for mission. That is what I understand. That is how we are united. That mission is united us. So I respect him, I love him, and I know his ministry. I may not know him personally and personal life, but I know his ministry, his excellent ministry. And now he is even after retired from EU, he is working, I think. So I thought Bavani Rajan will give some more information. Thank you, and then welcome, and then again, once again, your contribution to the speaking books in different groups is so greatly acknowledged, and I thank you on behalf of everyone here. Welcome today, and Please, we are looking forward to hear your reviews. Thank you. Over to Bavani. Yeah.
Thank you, Rajasekaran. Thank you very much. In fact, you know that usually I get you prayer information about people. Today, it had been a day of hectic, taking my wife to the hospital for a review, and then I did not find much time to connect with Aathma Soruban Ayya. But however, thank you for your wonderful introduction that he is a man from EU, and then his credentials about his biblical scholarship, teaching, and his ministry in various forums and throughout his life, nearly for 40 years. This is such a great. This gives us the information, gives us some kind of knowledge that the wealth, the treasure that he possesses, the wealth of knowledge that he will be possessing in this mission field. So, thank you, Aya, for choosing. I think this book I have. I remember reading a few books or something about PKD Lee long back. I don't know now much of his writings or other his type of ministry and all that. We are very eager to listen to you about the book He Leadeth Me, a wonderful title. Sir, the forum is yours for you to present your book review. Thank you. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Ayya, Reverend Bavani Ayya and Reverend Dr. Rajasekaran, for the words of introduction, kind words of introduction. I'm so privileged to be part of this group. Just before I introduce the book, for the sake of all our brothers and participants, after retirement from UESI, I just joined with Scripture Union to help in the Bible ministry department. It's just 1 year past. So I thank God for your continued partnership. I request your prayers for me as I continue with various other ministries too. So I'll just present my PowerPoint presentation so that we'll be able to save a lot of time. So I should go to,
So you are going to.
yeah,
You need PowerPoint.
yes.
Present, right? Thambi,
So
Kiruba.
if he can instruct me, I can follow it.
No, you just, there is a present. There is
Yeah,
a, you can
okay.
just press it and then it will appear on the screen, sir.
Yeah,
We doesn't, I don't think we don't need to get any help from brother. You try this. If you have any technical problems, that
Yeah, you please go
click
ahead
that
with the
present.
PDF,
Yeah.
PPT. Yeah, the PPT கொஞ்சம் இது போடணும் அவங்க ஆத்ம சொரூபன் அவங்களுக்கு கொஞ்சம் ஓபன் பண்ணி கொடுக்குது.
Yeah, Aathma Soruban Ayya.
yes, yeah.
Can you see that below that there
Yeah.
is one present?
Yeah,
You press
present.
present.
Yeah.
There
Yes.
it will appear slides. Then you go
Okay.
there. It will automatically come on the screen. Just press present and then slides. PowerPoint slides. And then you are on a computer, isn't it?
Yeah, yes.
Because this material should be with Karuba. Otherwise, he can't help. You have to do it here.
No, he will give the admin.
Oh, I see. Okay. Usually I do this.
ஆச்சு?
It says it's processing.
Okay. I think you can speak, Anna.
Yeah.
It will just come. Yeah. So it's in the process.
Yeah. Okay.
தம்பி என்னாச்சுப்பா? போடுறியா? இந்த பண்ணிட்டாரு.
Yeah. Yes. Sir.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. So this is the author of the book, Mr. P.K.D. Lee. So the overall book talks about what does Moses and his adventures mean to me. Go on this journey through the book of Exodus as it is made alive by knowing historical background, seeing what the rest of the Bible says, and other insights. This is a book meant for all, written in easy to understand language with questions for discussions or further study at the end of every chapter. There arose a king in Exodus chapter 1 verse 8 refers to a change in dynasty by revolt, not by the succession of a new king. We all know that there was a king who did not know Joseph because in the line of pharaohs, so there was a new dynasty, and God gives signs to the leaders. So when we step out in faith, God will prove the truth of his promise and not otherwise. So we have seen in the life of Moses that he stepped out in faith and he obeyed God's leading and he obeyed God's will, and he was able to lead such a big crowd of people. So this is going to be the focus of this book. So He Leadeth Me, this book is available with UESI Publication Trust, 19 Millers Road, Chennai 10. So the email ID is given, phone number is given. It's also available through Amazon.in, and the price of this book is rupees 130. So published by IVP India, which is an unit of UESA Publication Trust, where I was part of before retirement. So this book, I know the author personally. So he has come to UESA office to meet us. So he was educated in India, earned degrees in both engineering and theology. After 20 years of successful career as a senior officer with the Indian Railways, he took retirement and joined Haga Institute as their representative in India. Later, he served as the Vice President, International Advancement, in charge of the worldwide ministry of Haga Institute. He lives with his wife, Mrs. Lalita, in Tambram, where he worships with the Powerhouse Church in Tambram. So his email ID is given. So introduction, the Israelite history of Exodus. This is the introduction to the book. So Hiskas Pharaoh, so was the last Pharaoh when Joseph was giving leadership in Egypt. Exodus 1:8 refers to the eviction of Hiskas dynasty to Hamitic rulers after the Hamitic revolution. So there was a change in the leadership, and Hiskas dynasty was removed from power and Hamitic rulers came into power. So the Hamitic rulers were afraid of the Jewish race that they would take the power in Egypt because they were growing in number. This led them to treat the Jews cruelly, starting from bonded labor to infanticide. We know that even Moses was safeguarded by his sister and mother, and he was brought up by the daughter of Pharaoh. This is how God miraculously saved Moses, the great leader. The 300 and more years of slavery in Egypt damaged the mindset of the Hebrews, and they became slave in their mindset. They did not value God. They did not worship God as he had been revealed in the scriptures. In a sense, they almost forgot God. That's what the book says. So Exodus 1-4. Now I have given the division based on the chapters. The first three chapters are based on Exodus chapters 1 to 4. So, likewise, it goes on. Chapter 1 talks about the suffering of the Hebrews. The growth of the Israelites in number was a blessing by God, but it was a threat to the Egyptians, especially this new dynasty. So they wanted to curtail their growth by infanticide and putting them into hard labor, but they could not suppress the Israelites' growth. So they kept growing in number. Chapter 2 talks about Moses' flight from Egypt. Moses, who was born during the edict to kill the infants, Jewish children below 2 years, was protected unknowingly by the daughter of Pharaoh, who issued the edict. But when Moses knew the Jewish Egyptian rivalry, he took vengeance on his own hand, which God did not expect of him. So he had to flee from Egypt. Someone found out that he took vengeance on an Egyptian and it was known. So he had to escape for his life. Chapter 3, the call of Moses. God revealed himself to Moses. This is very important. So God had a specific place in his heart for Moses, and he explained his purpose for the people. And he was used as an instrument of God. So initially hesitant, Moses was willing to obey, and he understood the apocalyptic perspective of God when he obeyed. How God revealed himself. Moses was able to understand God very well so that he will be able to communicate to the people what God communicated to him. So he was able to prove that God keeps his promises. So when God called him, Moses was initially hesitant, but when he accepted his call, God used him mightily. So, chapter 4 talks about the plagues on Egypt when God wanted his people to be protected from the hands of Egypt and he wanted them to go to the promised land. God used Moses as his representative to speak to the Pharaoh. As much as the Egyptian magicians could duplicate the miracles done by Moses, God hardened the heart of Pharaoh, ultimately to show who Yahweh was. While he underestimated the power of God, the Pharaoh rebelled against God. So this man, the king Pharaoh, so he rebelled against God. In spite of having seen the miraculous power of God, he was not realizing his weakness. So he uh, caused utter damage to his own people, his own nation. So his magicians also duplicated the miracles that performed by Moses. So it doubled the damage. Already, when Moses performed the miracle, there was the damage. And when these magicians, to prove themselves, they performed miracles and it hurt their own people that did not make any single damage to the people of God, the Israelites. And chapter 5 talks about the Passover, very important. The Passover, though indicated redemption of the people of God from Egypt, it implied family salvation, perfection, or purity. The author of this book identifies similarities between the Easter event and the Jewish Passover. Like, for example, the dedication of the firstborn to God and the death of the firstborn, the Lord Jesus Christ. And then another comparison was the promised land and the new life in Christ. So very beautifully explained. So chapter 6 talks about the crossing of the Red Sea. God took the Israelites in a long route so that he will help them learn building cohesion between them. So if they had crossed the land, so they would have reached early, but God took them to a longer route, relatively longer route. So while crossing, so they were able to understand God better and understand one another better. Crossing Red Sea is another ample evidence of God's help in addressing the obstacles and helping the Israelites be protected from the enemies. So you see how God protected the people of Israel. So as soon as they crossed the Red Sea, the enemies, the Pharaoh's army, wanted to pursue them, but the Red Sea again closed. They were not able to pursue the enemies, pursue the Israelites. So they were all into the water, and they all perished. So this is how God protected. Chapter 7 talks about journey to Mount Sinai, where the Lord gave uh, the miraculous provision of manna, turning of bitter water into sweet, and fighting the enemies. All through this, so God has been teaching various lessons to the people of God and to the leader Moses. But Moses learned to turn to God in prayer and worshiping God, and he was able to guide people also to worship God. Whether people learned lessons or not, Moses was consistently learning lessons from God. He never turned away from God. But people, whenever there was something good happening, they turned to God and worshipped Him. Whenever there was some problem happening, so they turned away from God and they turned to idols. But the journey to Mount Sinai was a good, platform for Moses to learn so many lessons. Chapter 8 talks about Jethro's counsel. Jethro, we know he was the person who was guiding Moses, his son-in-law. Uh, by profession, he was a priest. He has been observing the haphazard ways of dealing with people and various issues by Moses. He gave Moses a wise counsel to appoint leaders at various levels. He advised Moses to consult with God. See, don't do whatever I said, but you consult with God. This is very important. Moses' father-in-law, who himself was a priest, so he was able to guide him properly. It was not human in wisdom, but he said, "Whatever I give you as counsel, please consult with God before you implement." Chapter 9 talks about the Epiphany at Sinai. So we all know that God appeared to Moses in various ways. In the present here, specifically, he appeared to him in the presence of people, so that the people would know that Moses represented God. Meeting God for priests was a necessity. It needed special preparation and sanctification. The common public were not to meet God. Of course, this one occasion, so God met Moses in the presence of God's people. How grateful are we to be to God for the easy access that we enjoy now? So there was restrictions for people to meet God, but now we all have the privilege to have the easy access to God. Chapter 10 talks about the law associated with the covenant. Covenant is something that God established, God initiated. God gave them the law to ensure that they worship Him alone, not any other gods. The very basic purpose of covenant was to restrict people to worship God alone and not to worship any other idols. The purpose of the covenant was to make people serve as God's community and to obey God's laws. And the covenant combined only made the Israelites the people of God. So the law and the covenant together made the Israelites as the people of God. Otherwise, so they will be like any other people. So this people group has speciality as God has given the law so that they will obey, and He has given the covenant as a privilege to be their God, and uh, people will be as people of God. Chapter 11 talks about the sealing the covenant. Sealing of the covenant requires utter obedience to the prescriptions of the covenant. When God redeems His people, He did it unconditionally. He didn't say any condition. Even when He redeems us, when He gives us His salvation, there is no condition for us. But the covenant requires walking in obedience to God's laws, as agreed by the people. Remember, in Exodus 24:27, they made a promise to God that they will abide by the laws of God. Similarly, walking by the Spirit in the New Testament time is not an option but obligatory. So we are saved by His grace, but when it comes to walking by the Spirit, that becomes obligatory. So, chapter 12, the breaking of the covenant. So, whenever people uh, felt that God has not listened to them, so they blame God for His silence. In fact, they were deaf. People were deaf. So, whenever they felt that God was not speaking to them, in fact, God was speaking to them, they turned to idols and worshipped the idols. Moses, as an instrument of God, kept standing between God and the people. So he had the guts to talk to the people, and he had the liberty to talk to God whenever there was dispute. So he got angry at the people, and he was bold enough to talk to people. He was humble enough to plead with God for forgiveness for the people. So this is how he stood as a instrument between the people of God and God. And now we turn to the next chapter, chapter 13, building the Ark of the Covenant. God instructed Moses to construct the tabernacle out of willing and ungrudging offerings. This is very important. The Ark of the Covenant has been moving around all the time. But God now instructed that there should be a tabernacle built so that the Ark of the Covenant can be kept safe. Moses did all that was associated with the tabernacle using the skills of experts in each art and each work. Is our giving an expression of faith or a demand for greater blessings? So, those people who supported the ministry of building the Ark of the Covenant or building the tabernacle, they gave liberally. They did not expect anything, but they expressed their faith in God. But now giving in Christianity has become a demand for a greater blessings. Chapter 14 talks about commissioning the priests. So God authorized Moses to consecrate the priests. What a privilege. He was not a priest, but he was like a bishop, ordaining the priests. The office of the priest always indicated authority and separation for purity. The dress they wore signified purity. When they passed on their garments to their successors, the succession continued. The legacy of the priesthood continued. That we see that in chapter 29 of Exodus, verse 29. So this is how the priestly ministry was going on, and it was a systematic priestly ministry that began during the time of Moses. Chapter 15 talks about commissioning the tabernacle. After getting everything ready, so Moses spent 3 months with God, it looks like, in chapter 40. After the commissioning of the priests, Moses built the tabernacle for 6 months. It was not a pucca building, but still it took 6 months to build the tabernacle. Then God instructed as to how it should be commissioned. So, based on God's instruction, Moses commissioned the tabernacle. The contents of the Ark of the Covenant and everything in the tabernacle were set apart for the use of the worship of God. They were used only for the worship of God exclusively. How serious are we in maintaining holiness in our worship? So, when we see the conclusion of this book, I like this one particular phrase that he used. The new covenant in the New Testament can be summed up in one phrase: follow me. As the Lord said to the disciples, follow me. That is the new covenant. So, my comments about this book with 160 pages is not a verse by verse commentary. The author has brought out the leadership traits through the life of Moses. The points the author brings out are down to earth and very unique, but those points could have been highlighted. He vividly brings out how the author of Exodus identifies the relationship between God and God's people and between the law and the covenant. This covenantal relationship finds its fulfillment in the redemption of the whole mankind through the Lord Jesus on the cross. The author has left the application to the present context to the discretion of the readers by giving some questions to be answered or to be discussed. The questions given at the end of each chapter are generally effective, but some questions need clarity. So I like this book very much. I have read once, so I encourage you to read this book for yourself. The book is available in UESI and in Amazon.in. Thank you very much for the time given.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome, Aya.
So much for the presentation of this book, Aya. Can we take off this PowerPoint slides now?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Aya. Thank you. That's very great. And you did a good job by putting the whole content in a PowerPoint format so that the time is well managed. So I have few observations I would like to share, but before I give I will do that as a concluding remark when we close this session. I now straight away ask the forum to give their feedback, comments, or questions, anything from the presentations. May I now ask our brother John Sunder to come out with his comments or observations or complimentary.
Thank you. Good evening to one and all. And I thank God for giving me an opportunity to join this forum and give my idea about the book, He Leadeth Me, written by P.K.D. Lee. Though the author is dealing about Moses, a familiar subject or a familiar character to all Christians, the different approach and the different angle he has focused is very much impressed by me. Because the title of the book is He Leadeth Me, and when he concludes it, he says, Follow me. So, when God's leadeth one, we have to follow him. There is no other go. For a blessed life and for a blessed ministry, we have to follow when God leads us. So, it was very impressive, and I was very much inspired by the very title and by the very ending. In the New Testament, as I say, follow me. Jesus said, follow me. So really, I am very happy to learn this, and also it's very useful for me. So regarding all this history of Israelites, regarding that Exodus, actually they've given some chapters, some 13 to 14, 15 chapters, and everything. What I understood from this way, when the regime of Hyksos dynasty, it was when it was conquered by Hamite rulers, everything changed. So, in the same way, when people of God, when one regime changes to other regime, they have to suffer. Maybe God permits the suffering. That suffering is somewhat inward blessing also. So only when they undergo the suffering, through Moses, God, freed all the Israelites from the clutches of the Egyptian dynasty. So apart from this, the chapter was in the first chapter, the growth of the Israelites. Though if God was not with the Israelites, they would not have grown to such an extent. So God was, as He promised in Genesis 1:28, as we have to multiply. So, in the same way that blessed Israelites were multiplying, and it became a threat to the Egyptian dynasty, Egyptian that Hamitic rulers, and they actually what all the steps they took to suppress the Israelites failed. That is one more thing that we have to point out. So God was with them all the time, though they have forgotten God, though they went for the idol worship, though they have forgotten all the things God had given to them, all the blessings they enjoyed. But one man, Moses, as a leader, he was there to lead them to a blessed outing from that bondage of the Egyptian dynasty. So Moses, as a very good leader, uh, as a leader, he was very perfect. He was very perfect in his leadership because of the reason that he understood the calling of God, and he had determined himself to fulfill his calling. In these days, we those who have come for ministry, come for doing the God's work, they must have a definite calling. Moses had a definite calling, and his determination was very good, and his determination was very fine and very strong. And see, and what God told him, God never promised him that he would enter into Canaan. What the mission God gave to Moses was just to free the people from the Egyptian, that rule. So Moses did that, and not only that, Moses also he also produced one more leader, Joshua. That is more important. In these days, we see so many ministries are falling down because of the reason there was not another leader to be brought up. Whatever ministry we are doing, we must have an idea, we must have an determination to bring up another leader in his absence. That Moses was very particular about that, and he brought that. And though it was not said in this book, it's my idea that I have to put forth. Then regarding Moses, he left Egypt because of killing one Egyptian. That also God's plan, and Moses realized that and come back, and also doing miracles and all these things by the power of God. And also we understand the plagues that Egyptian people they suffer. Though the plagues did not affect the Israelites, though they were the same place, though they were inside the same country, God's miracle that it saved the Egyptians. And also come to Passover, where there is we read that Passover meant for the not only for the freedom of the Israel people, but it was meant for the family salvation, perfection, and also for purity, that they should understand that they should lead a perfect life before God, and they should have purity in all their characters, and also the family salvation. Everything was put forth by the author, and also it was a very, in a clear way, crystal clear way. Aathma Soruban Ayya has given to us. So it's very nice, and in the way he has put it in the this PDF, that's also very fine, so that we can understand all these things. Then if you go on for the next chapter regarding that covenant that was made, in also that sealing the covenant, this unconditional, but it requires walking in obedience. So God has already given that obedience is more important. That when the Israelites when they failed to obey God in this wilderness, we know how much sufferings they underwent. But Moses was there, who stood in between the God and the people as a savior, and he saved them, and also he prayed them, and also he was begging in front of God to save the people. He also, once we know from the Bible that Moses was praying that if you don't save the Israelites, please just remove my name from the book of life. So in such a way, he was very particular, and he was very loving and very concerned about this Israel people. And also the Ark of Covenant, and another chapter 13, Ark of Covenant, and how it was God has given the idea, and how the construction of the tabernacle should be. Everything was there. And finally, I want to tell one more thing, as the time is ticking on, that the leadership, his father, um, his father was giving some idea that in the chapter 8, Jethro's counsel, that is way of dealing with the issues. As he was a priest, Jethro was giving an idea, that is what in nowadays our administration, whether it is the district administration or the state administration, they follow the same pattern. See, regarding this, he was appointing leaders to some sect of people to solve their issues. As we see in the local body constitutions, panchayat, and we come across municipality, corporation, and state. In such a way, when the whole system is divided into sections, then the leader of that section can look after the issues very much, and also help them to solve the problems. So it was very touching. So the people nowadays in the administration, everything, we can understand that everything has come from Bible, also Bible only. So and finally, I want to tell the final thing. The he was Moses was with God for 3 months, and he took 6 months to build the tabernacle according to God's ideas. So before doing anything, before doing our ministry, we have to be with God alone. We had to be with God alone, and to get all the secrets and all the ideas from God, so that we can do a very fruitful ministry in our life. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I thank God.
Thank you, brother, for your various comments on various aspects of the presentation. With you have keenly observed certain aspects like the local administration's Moses' ability, that how it has come from the scriptures, and the covenantal agreement between God and the Israelites, and from your Moses, the way you looked at this book from a different perspective, from different angle, which you said is something unique you found in this book. So there were many observations, many points. Some of them were observations, some of them were complementary to the presentation of the content of the book. I thank you for your comments and observations and complimentary remarks. So now may I request Dr. Rajasekaran Iyer to come out with his comments and observations.
Thank you once again. Thank you. Thanks, Aathma Soruban. Really, you brought a very beautiful book that really impressing everybody, because leadership is a very most attractive subject. And Moses is a very right person, and is a very good example in the Bible for the leadership. I love that. I like the leadership of Moses, and I never found any such leaders. My imitation of a leader is next to Jesus is Moses. So he's such a person, and this book is really a very good book. That even though it is not a commentary, but it has brought a very important thought in every chapter uh, from a point of leadership. So Annan has brought very beautiful because EU people usually they are good readers, and I tried from the beginning of the this program, speaking book in Tamil, almost it's going to be 2 years. So I tried a lot of you brothers and sisters, somebody, but I tell you, though they are all good readers, but they are not good reviewers. Very few, and one among them is Aathma Soruban. I think he's the only one from the EU background has come, and of course Chalapannan is there, and one or two, but he's one among the few who reviews the book. So that is what the program is encouraging. Not only read the book, but review the book, listen the book, and present the book, so that everybody will come to know that. So this is how we run this program with the purpose. So I thank Anand for his wonderful presentation, wonderful review of this book, and really the way you presented in the PPT makes us to think about the leadership of Moses and think about the leadership he rendered to the Israel community in the wilderness, and the way he was led by God, and the way he led the Israel people, very unique, very unique. It's a very good model that we need to as a church. So I could see this book as a covenant continuous. God is a God of covenant that we all know. He made covenant even with Adam and Eve. Then he continues the covenant with Abraham, Isaac. Then we see the covenant was continuing with Moses, and that is the uh, thing that we see in the book of Exodus, how God continues his covenant. Based on that, how he led the people through Moses. So beautifully brought out this continuation covenant of God in this book of Exodus. And this not only continues, it is also talks about the covenant carriers. So that is what God always there. God is the God of covenant, but still he appoints the carriers of the covenant. So that is what we see. For Moses was a kind of a carrier, carrying God's covenant, and he was mightily used to prove the covenant, making God is still loving, still kind, and still there to fulfill his promise and purpose. So that is what we see. The covenant, even though the people broke the covenant, but he did not. He was still faithful. So that we see from the life and ministry of Moses. And the conclusion which was made very beautiful, that the church is continuing that covenant. Now the church is the carrier of God's covenant. We continue. So that is how we are also part of the God's covenant. It is not only the covenant is brought to the our covenant made with Israel people, Moses and all, but it is extended to the church, that we are part of God's covenant, and we are called as a leaders, as Moses is the leader. So we have a good model, Moses in the Bible, and how God led him. The same God is able to lead us, and so therefore we can also boldly say, God leads me, God leads us, God leads the church. So that's a beautiful book, and thank you, Nan, for presenting and bringing this book. And we are so happy and we are so blessed. Yes, this is a very useful book. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Rajasekaran, for your, as usual, your novel and provocative and thought-provoking comments, along with your complimentary remarks, and especially you and both John Sunder and you have specifically mentioned about the leadership of Moses, and then you made a special mention that, in your opinion, the next to Jesus Christ, the best leader is Moses, which is being appreciated and accepted by all sections of the Christian community. If I am saying, if I say so, it will not be so wrong. So thank you for your comments. And this book actually has many lessons for in more than 2-3 disciplines like obedience, administration, and respecting God's command, and so on. There are many divisions and many areas, many aspects of people, not only in the life, it's a faith life and religious life of people of Israel, but also later on in the church and today's context also it could be interpreted. So thank you for your comments, and I have few observations and a few questions also. Once again, I like to thank Aya for his wonderful presentation. Then, when I looked at the photograph of the author PhD PKD Lee, I was confusing myself if there is another PKD Lee with the same name, Lee, who is somebody, I think is some North Korean or some, so he's written some books. But as soon as I saw the photo, I remembered because he is well known in the Haggai International Ministry. I was sometime Haggai International faculty teaching both in Singapore and in Hawaii. I had a training also, faculty development seminar. But by the time PKD Lee's leadership was slowly going out, but everybody who knew, who especially the faculty and the other alumni knew of immense contribution of PKD Lee. And this is a great information that you told me that he is living in near Tamborong. Probably I would like to take his phone number or email ID later so that if I find time, I may like to have some chat with him. So with this, for your appreciation, my thing, what I saw from this book, the 13-14 chapter, is just an abridged version of the book of Exodus. Not giving, as you already said, not giving words by words or chapter by chapter comment. There is not been any commentary, but it is a summary of the book under divided under various titles. It kind of abridgment and short summary of the specifically focusing on the role of Moses in liberating the people of Israel. That's how I looked at this book. And secondly, I have a few questions. The thing is, in the chapter 19, he says about the Epiphany, about the burning bush, in Exodus chapter 3, I think. The burning bush, the Epiphany is different from theophany. Although some authors say that it can both can mean the same thing in certain contexts. Some people say that, but the theophany is the usual where God, the appearance of God. In Epiphany, God appears in a different form, transfiguration. That is what's happening in the Matthew chapter 18 and all in the New Testament. It talks about transfiguration of Jesus Christ. So that is the appearance of the theophany is the காட்சி, கடவுள் காட்சி, தெய்வ காட்சி. It's not one form to another form. That is the form of God. So I think how did the author say this as a epiphany is something I have a question. Probably I don't know whether I could be able to explain or anything. This is in my mind. And secondly, about the leadership, we all know that usually the one particular chapter where you mentioned about Jethro's advice, when he saw that he was sitting as a judge and looking at the various problems of the various tribes of the people from day to day, from morning to evening, he gives them an advice, accordingly acts. Usually in technical knowledge and technical management, technical jargon, we all know that it is called the delegation of duties, which people say is most important in administration. So both by the Western scholars and in Indian scholars, when they speak about the leadership, Christian leadership, this particular chapter and the delegation of duty, as advised by his father-in-law Jethro, comes up. So that is something he has mentioned, but I don't know whether he has further explained it on it in the book, but that mention is being there, and that is being followed by being specifically mentioned by both our panelists, Dr. Rajasekaran and brother John Sunder, brother also. That is one thing. Then there is another great role Moses played. I think I don't know where in the chapters, neither in any of the verses or in any of the subheading like that, I did not find it in your presentation. When we speak about Moses, when we speak about and the best next best thing, or even the best thing which could be equated with the work of Christ, is that intercessory prayer of Moses. Strike my name from your life. God says that forget these people. I will make you a new nation. I will bless you. This is the blessing that given to Abraham was given again with a new type, new chapter, beginning of new chapter. But he was so passionate. No, no, don't do that, Lord, in your anger. Don't do that. Then he goes to the extent, if you don't do that, you strike my name. So most great interceder of people, like how Abraham interceded, like how on the Jesus Christ on the cross interceded for us, between reconciling the mankind and Christ and the Lord and the Father. That's one thing. I don't know whether he has left it out in his book, or is there somewhere which you have not mentioned. I'm not sure. So I also want to know of that. And the last concluding chapter, leaving the application part of this book to the readers, especially to the question of present context, seems to be very surprising to me. Whether the readers accept or not, I feel that he should have made his own observations by relating various things or citing some examples, biblical verses from the same within the book of Exodus also. That is one thing. Then, with regard to the obedience and call of Moses, how he obeyed God and took this responsibility to lead the people of Israel, is not very clearly mentioned in the book of Exodus, when the calling of Moses, although it's there. In fact, we know that he was hesitant. God has to convince him through some miracles and all that. But this is very excellently remembered by the book of Hebrews, where he says how he was called and how Moses obeyed. What did he do to come? We all know that in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 24, he says that the author of Hebrews says that by faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. That's the most important aspect. What a glory he was leaving. This sacrificial aspect of Moses was not recorded in the Exodus, as we all know. But the author of Hebrew remembers, and when he was remembering so many people by faith, how many people did, what are the things they did. Here he says that he refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. This is what the book of Hebrews talk about. The heart of Moses when he took up when he obeyed the God and followed. That is how he followed Lord's command. And finally, I don't know whether this has been, my question is whether this aspect of reference from Hebrew has been put in the book anywhere to give credit, to appreciate the obedience of Moses in response to God's call. Whether is there been any mention about it? That's something I like to know from you, Yeah, finally, I have a feeling that somehow the title "He Leadeth Me" does not very well fit well with the content of the book. It, on the contrary, I found it would have fit very well with Joshua, because when Joshua was struggling, I don't know really, and this with great humility and respect for Aya, I'm making this statement. In Joshua, when he says in the verse 9, we read that, "Have I not commanded you?" Joshua chapter 1. We all know that. Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Do not be dismayed. Do not be discouraged. It is something that he says, for which what he says is that what is the evidence for him that the Lord will give him? He says, "As I was with Moses, I will be with you." So here the context, here the title comes, as he led Moses, he will also lead Joshua into that. So somehow the title, including Joshua, becomes very well. Finally, my observation and my clarification I need is that it's not a clarification. I'm saying that it's a the follow me, because he started "He leadeth me." The title "He leadeth me," there is an indication that he closes the chapter with the question, "Follow me." Is there a new commandment? But maybe in the to the title, it is very appropriate, looks good and novel, and attracts and our attention, impresses our hearts and minds. But the new commandment, similarly, if we have to say the new commandment, Christ gives the new commandment by saying this is the new commandment itself, where we know in John chapter 13, verse 24, I think, when the calling of washing of the disciples' feet, where he says that, "A new command I give you, love one another." That's the new command. Christ himself has said, "One another, I have loved you so much, so you must love one another." So a new commandment I give you is the commandment, love one another, given by God in the New Testament context. So whether it has to be in this context, it has to be seen, or in the context of Exodus, in line with the title of the book, this "Follow Me" as a new commandment should be taken. Is something I need some clarity. Yeah, but these are my things, and some of my doubts and questions. If you could answer these things, I will be very happy to know. And with this, I thank you so much. This is your time now to give your response for these things, as well as if you have left out anything, you want to say anything new in addition to that, this is the time for you, Aya. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Aya. Actually, I start from the last question. So, in fact, he didn't say new commandment; he says new covenant. So,
Oh,
requirement
covenant.
of the new covenant is he follow me. So, secondly, about the title, he has found a book, it's a hymn by Joseph Gilmore. "He leadeth me, O blessed thought, O words with heavenly comfort fraught." So he has given the hymn also in the first few pages of his book. So that very well tells about the overall content of the Exodus that will be reflected in the hymn. And the hymn starts with "He leadeth me." So that's why he has given this title. And about other things like the administration, leadership, all the other things, I really thank you for the supplementary thought. I think maybe these are all covered in his book, but not very obviously covered. And one more question you had about the application part. Uh, the Piccadilly has given the application in the form of questions. Now, he has not given any answers, but So the reader himself can identify the this application by answering the questions. That is how his book has been designed. So at the end of every chapter, there are several questions. There are some chapters there are one or two questions. In some chapters there are 5 or 6 questions, where one person answers all those questions. The applications proper will come to the person, and the thoughts that he wanted to communicate can be heard from the questions. In that sense, I think he is able to complement the application part through questions instead of giving direct answers. He makes the reader to work on that. In that sense, so this kind of a book will be really helpful for us, like who like to think and read further. So it makes us think in that sense. So thank you once again for all the complimentary, and thank you for the comments that you have given for the book. So maybe I will give you the number of the author, phone number of the author privately. I can communicate to him also. I think I didn't tell him that I'm going to review his book, so I will communicate to him. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. You have given a very well response, especially to my doubts and queries. It's really good that the overall context, everything fits very well. And these other panelists, as I have already complimented very well, I also, in line with them, I'm very appreciative of this book and your way of presentation. I thank each and every one of the panelists, Dr. Rajasekaran and Brother John Sunder. And thank you for this your time and your valuable comments and observations. So with this, we will take goodbye until we meet next time in the next session in the Speaking Books English Forum. On behalf of the Speaking Books English Forum, it is Bavani Rajan saying good night and goodbye to you all. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nain.
Thank you, sir.